My name is Mason Reed, 28, and the day my parents deemed me a failure was the day my life changed forever. Standing on their porch with one suitcase, my father's final words still burning in my ears, I felt utterly lost. Little did I know that the crumpled lottery ticket in my pocket would transform everything. Within hours of being thrown out, I became a multimillionaire. Ironic, right? Going from worthless to wealthy in the span of a sunset. Before I tell you how my life transformed overnight, let me know where you're watching from. And hit that like and subscribe button to follow my journey from disowned to millionaire. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, life always seemed pretty normal from the outside. Our two-story colonial with the pristine lawn and white picket fence was the picture of American suburban success. But inside those walls, the pressure was always cranked to maximum. My parents, Walter and Deborah Reed, weren't bad people. They just had very specific ideas about success and how to achieve it. Dad worked his way up to senior management at an insurance company, putting in 60-hour weeks for 30 years. Mom was an elementary school principal known for improving test scores wherever she went. They believed in hard work, practical careers, and measurable achievements. Creativity? That was a hobby, not a career path. I was a good student in my early years. Honor roll math competitions, science fairs. I checked all the boxes that made my parents beam with pride at parent-teacher conferences. Mason has so much potential, teachers would say, and my parents would nod knowingly. The problem was that with each accomplishment, the bar would rise just a little higher. My older brother Scott made everything harder. 4 years older than me, he was the golden child who set the family standard. Perfect SAT scores, full scholarship to Cornell, degree in finance, job at a prestigious consulting firm by 23. Married to his college sweetheart by 25. Every Christmas dinner, every family reunion, the conversation inevitably turned to Scott's latest promotion or property investment. I both loved and resented him for it. The first real crack in my relationship with my parents appeared during my junior year of high school. While Scott had joined debate team and student government, I found myself drawn to the music room. I'd always loved music, but when I discovered composition, something clicked. I spent hours after school working with our music teacher, Mr. Grayson, learning about chord progressions and sound engineering. For the first time, I felt truly passionate about something. When I announced my intention to study music production in college, you'd have thought I'd declared a plan to join the circus. That's not a real degree, Mason, my father said, not even looking up from his newspaper. What about law? You've always been good at arguing your point, my mother suggested, as if she hadn't heard me at all. The arguments stretched across my entire senior year. In the end, we compromised. I would double major in music and business at a state school instead of the specialized music program I dreamed of. Looking back, that compromise set the pattern for the next decade of my life, always splitting my focus, never fully committing to either path. College was a time of both freedom and frustration. I excelled in my music classes but struggled to maintain interest in accounting and marketing principles. I formed a band, started producing tracks for other campus musicians, even scored a short student film that won a regional award. But whenever I called home, the first questions were always about my business courses and internship prospects. Then came graduation, right in the middle of the 2008 recession. The job market was a wasteland, especially for new graduates with unconventional degree combinations. Scott had graduated 4 years earlier into a booming economy. I emerged into economic chaos. The next few years became a blur of service jobs and side hustles. I worked as a barista, a rideshare driver, a warehouse worker, all while trying to build up production credits on evenings and weekends. I rented a tiny apartment with 2 roommates, lived on ramen and peanut butter, and sent out hundreds of applications to recording studios and media companies. 3 years after graduation, I landed an assistant position at a small recording studio. The pay was terrible. But it was in my field. I thought my parents would finally see I was making progress. Instead, they saw it as proof that my chosen path was a dead end. You could be making triple that in an entry-level business position, Dad pointed out during one particularly tense phone call. When the studio went under 8 months later, another victim of the streaming revolution, I found myself at a crossroads. With rent due and no immediate prospects, I swallowed my pride and asked if I could move back home. Just until I get back on my feet. What was meant to be a few months stretched into 3 years. I found work at a guitar store, gave music lessons on weekends, and picked up occasional freelance production gigs. But Boston's cost of living made saving from my own place nearly impossible on those combined incomes. Living under my parents' roof in my mid-20s was a special kind of hell. Every day felt like a silent, and sometimes not so silent, referendum on my life choices. Mom would leave job listings for corporate positions on the kitchen counter. Dad would talk about Scott's latest bonus over dinner. The unspoken message was clear: you took a wrong turn. And now you're paying for it. My one small act of hope during those years was buying a single lottery ticket each week. $5 that I could barely afford. But it gave me something to dream about. I never told my parents. They would have seen it as just another example of magical thinking instead of practical action. Every Friday, I'd check the numbers, shrug off the inevitable disappointment, and go back to my reality. Until that one Friday changed everything. It started like any other morning. I came downstairs to find my parents already at the breakfast table, Dad scanning news on his tablet, Mom reviewing her school calendar. I poured myself coffee and grabbed a piece of toast, planning to eat quickly and head to my Saturday shift at the guitar store. There's a management training program starting at Northeastern next month, Dad said without looking up. Fully funded for qualified applicants. I've emailed you the link. I took a slow sip of coffee before responding. Thanks, but I'm not interested in management training. Not interested in actual career advancement, you mean? He muttered. Mom jumped in with her usual peacekeeping approach. Your cousin Brandon just got promoted at his accounting firm. Partner track before 35. Bought a beautiful condo in Cambridge. I'd heard about Brandon's success approximately 12 times that week. Good for Brandon, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Good for Brandon is right, Dad said, finally putting down his tablet. Meanwhile, you're approaching 30 with nothing to show for it except some equipment in the basement, and a drawer full of name tags from various dead-end jobs. Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the accumulated weight of 1,000 small criticisms. Maybe it was lack of sleep after a late-night session trying to finish a mix for a local band. Whatever it was, I couldn't swallow my response this time. Those dead-end jobs have been paying rent to you for 3 years, I said. And that equipment in the basement just earned me a production credit on an indie album that's getting good streaming numbers. Dad's face reddened. Streaming numbers? Is that what you think success looks like? At your age, I was already a department manager with a mortgage and a family to support. It's a different world now, Dad. The economy. The economy? He interrupted. Always an excuse. Your brother managed to succeed in the same economy. I'm not Scott. The words came out louder than I intended. And I don't want Scott's life. I'm building something different. Mom's eyes filled with tears, her typical response to conflict. We just want what's best for you, Mason. We're worried about your future. No, I said quietly. You want what you think is best for me. You've never actually listened to what I want. Dad pushed his chair back from the table, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. What you want is to live in a fantasy world where playing around with sound equipment pays the bills. It's time to grow up, son. Get a real job or get out of this house. The kitchen fell silent. We'd been dancing around this ultimatum for months, maybe years, but he never stated it so bluntly before. I have real jobs, I said. Multiple ones, in fact. And I'm building a career in music production. It takes time. Time. You've had time. You've had opportunities. You've had advantages most people would kill for. And you've squandered them all on this pipe dream. Mom reached for his arm. Walter, please. He shrugged her off. No, Deborah. I'm done watching him waste his life. Mason. This isn't a negotiation anymore. Either apply to that management program on Monday, or find somewhere else to live. I looked at my mother, hoping for support, but she stared down at her coffee cup. Her silence hurt more than Dad's shouting. Fine, I said, standing up. I'll be out by the end of the day. Dad looked momentarily surprised, as if he hadn't expected me to choose leaving. You have until noon, he said, his voice cold. I have a golf game this afternoon. I went upstairs and stared at my room, the posters I'd never taken down from high school. The desk where I'd done homework and later mixed tracks, the bed I'd slept in since childhood. How do you pack a life into one suitcase? I grabbed essentials first: underwear, socks, jeans, t-shirts. My laptop. Then the irreplaceables, the external hard drive with all my music files, a few family photos from happier times, the vintage vinyl records my grandfather had left me. The hardest part was my equipment. The keyboard, audio interface, microphones, and monitors that I'd saved for years to buy, they wouldn't fit in a suitcase. I'd have to leave them behind and hope I could retrieve them later, once I found a place to stay. By 11:30, I stood in the foyer with my suitcase and backpack. Dad was already dressed for golf, car keys in hand. Mom hovered near the stairs, looking torn. This is a mistake, Mason, Dad said. But maybe it's one you need to make to finally understand the real world. I understand the real world just fine, I replied. I just don't worship the same parts of it that you do. He shook his head and opened the front door. Call us when you're ready to get serious about your life. Mom finally stepped forward. Where will you go? She asked quietly. I'll figure it out, I said, not meeting her eyes. I couldn't bear to see the disappointment there. She looked like she wanted to say more, but Dad was already halfway to the car. Without another word, I walked past her, down the familiar front steps, and away from the only home I'd ever known. Once I reached the end of the block, the reality of my situation hit me full force. I had exactly $243 in my checking account. My next paycheck from the guitar store wouldn't come for another week. Most of my friends either still lived with parents, or had roommates in fully occupied apartments. A quick check of hotel prices on my phone confirmed what I already knew: Boston was an expensive city to be suddenly homeless in. I called Mike, my closest friend from college who had a one-bedroom in Somerville. He couldn't offer a couch immediately. His girlfriend's parents were visiting for the weekend, but said I could crash there starting Monday. That left me needing a place for 2 nights. After an hour of walking with my increasingly heavy suitcase, I found a rundown motel near the highway that charged $89 per night. Not great. But it would leave me with enough for food until I could figure out next steps. The room was depressing: stained carpet, flickering fluorescent light in the bathroom, a mattress that sagged in the middle, but it was shelter. Sitting on the edge of that sad bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, I felt a wave of emotions crash over me. Anger at my father's ultimatum. Hurt at my mother's silence. Fear about what would happen next. And underneath it all, a gnawing doubt: what if they were right? What if I was just a delusional failure who couldn't accept reality? That moment, rock bottom in a cheap motel room with everything I owned in a single suitcase, was when my life changed forever. I emptied my pockets onto the motel nightstand: wallet, phone, keys to a house I no longer lived in, and the lottery ticket I'd bought the day before. I almost threw it away. This symbol of desperate hope that now seemed pathetic in the face of my circumstances. But out of habit, I pulled up the lottery website on my phone to check the numbers. The way I did every Friday evening. The first number matched. That wasn't unusual. I'd matched one number plenty of times before. The second number matched. A mild coincidence. Third number. Match. Fourth number. Match. My heart began to beat faster. 4 matches would win a small prize, maybe $100. That would help with my current situation. Fifth number. Match. I stood up involuntarily, staring at my phone screen. 5 numbers meant a significant prize. Sixth number. Match. The Powerball number. Match. I stared at the screen, then back at my ticket. Then at the screen again. 7 for 7. All numbers matching. The room seemed to tilt around me. No way, I whispered to the empty room. No fucking way. With shaking hands, I refreshed the website. Same numbers. I closed the browser and reopened it. Same numbers. I even restarted my phone, irrationally thinking there must be some glitch. When the numbers remained unchanged, I Googled Massachusetts Powerball jackpot amount and saw the figure, $57 million. The room spun again, and I had to sit down on the bed. My legs suddenly unable to support me. I'd seen enough documentaries about lottery winners to know that many ended up broke within a few years. Some even ended up worse off than before their windfall. With trembling fingers, I began researching what to do next, how to claim the prize, what options I had. The Massachusetts lottery offered winners a choice: take a reduced lump sum immediately or receive the full amount spread over 30 annual payments. After taxes, the lump sum would be approximately $24 million. The annuity would provide about $1.3 million per year after taxes. Both options represented more money than I could comprehend. As reality slowly sank in, I began to laugh. Then cry. Then laugh again. The emotional whiplash was overwhelming. Hours earlier, my father had deemed me a failure. Not worth the space I occupied in his house. Now I was worth more on paper than he'd earned in his entire career. I barely slept that night, despite my exhaustion. My mind raced with possibilities, plans, and precautions. I'd read enough about sudden wealth syndrome to know that I needed to be careful. So many lottery winners made impulsive decisions they later regretted. I was determined not to become another cautionary tale. The irony of my situation wasn't lost on me. For years, my parents had pushed me toward financial security through conventional means: college, corporate job, steady advancement. I'd resisted, pursuing my passion instead, living precariously as a result. And now, through pure chance, I'd achieved the financial security they'd wanted for me, but in the most impractical way imaginable. By dawn, I had a plan. I wouldn't tell anyone about my win until the money was securely in my account. I'd find professional help, financial advisors, attorneys, accountants, to guide me through the process. I'd be strategic about my new wealth, using it to build the life I wanted rather than just consuming mindlessly. As the first light of day filtered through the thin motel curtains, I finally dozed off, a strange sense of calm replacing the chaos of emotions from the night before. When I woke a few hours later, my first thought was that it had all been a dream. But the lottery ticket was still on the nightstand, and the numbers still matched when I checked again. I was a multimillionaire sleeping in an $89 motel room with everything I owned in a suitcase beside me. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. Monday morning, I walked into the Massachusetts State Lottery headquarters in Braintree wearing the same jeans and button-up shirt I'd had on when my parents kicked me out. The contrast between my appearance and my reason for being there wasn't lost on me. "I'd like to claim a prize," I told the receptionist, trying to keep my voice steady. "Congratulations. Fill out this form, and someone will be with you shortly," she replied with the practiced cheerfulness of someone who regularly dealt with winners of small amounts. I sat in the waiting area. Form balanced on my knee, carefully printing my information. Name. Address. I put Mike's, since I no longer had one of my own. Phone number. Social security number. Signature affirming I was not in default on any child support payments or state taxes. A lottery official named Patricia came to greet me about 20 minutes later. "Mr. Reed? Follow me, please." She led me to a private room with bland government-issue furniture and fluorescent lighting. "So, what brings you in today?" she asked pleasantly. Wordlessly, I handed her my ticket and the completed form. Her eyes widened as she checked the numbers against her computer. "Oh my goodness," she said, her professional demeanor momentarily cracking. "You're our jackpot winner." What followed was a crash course in suddenly becoming wealthy. Patricia explained that as a jackpot winner, I had important decisions to make. Lump sum or annuity? How did I want to be paid? Did I understand the tax implications? She also explained that in Massachusetts, lottery winners' names are public record. There was no way to claim anonymously. My name, town, and the amount would be released to the media. Some winners form a trust and have their attorney claim the prize, she advised. It doesn't keep your name completely private, but it creates a buffer. We strongly recommend consulting with a financial advisor and an attorney before making any decisions. I nodded, already having researched this. How long do I have to claim? 1 year from the drawing date, but I wouldn't wait that long. Interest is accumulating on this money that could be yours. She gave me a packet of information, including a list of financial advisors who specialized in sudden wealth. These are provided as a courtesy, not an endorsement, she clarified. Take your time, get professional help, and come back when you're ready. I thanked her, tucked the precious ticket into an envelope they provided, and left the building. No one in the world yet knew that I was now worth tens of millions of dollars. Not my parents, not Mike, not a soul. The secret felt both powerful and isolating. That afternoon, I called the first name on the list of financial advisors, Brandon Winters at a wealth management firm in downtown Boston. His assistant initially tried to schedule me for the following week. But when I mentioned I was claiming a lottery jackpot, my appointment was miraculously moved up to the next morning. Brandon turned out to be younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with an easy manner that put me at ease. "First things first," he said after I'd explained my situation. "That ticket needs to be in a secure location. Do you have a bank safe deposit box?" I shook my head. "Let's get you one immediately," he said. "Then we need to assemble your team, an attorney who specializes in trusts and estates, a CPA with high net worth experience, and possibly a personal security consultant." "Security consultant?" I echoed. Unfortunately, when your name is published as a lottery winner, you become a target. Not just for scammers and distant relatives asking for money, but sometimes for actual criminals. It's better to be prepared. Over the next week, I met with the team Brandon assembled. Jennifer Chen, an estate attorney who helped me create a trust to claim the winnings and began drafting a comprehensive estate plan. Michael Goldstein, a CPA who explained the tax implications in terms I could understand and helped me set aside the appropriate amount for federal and state taxes. And Rafael Diaz, a security consultant who advised me on everything from online privacy to physical security measures for my future home. I chose the lump sum option, deciding that having control over the full amount made more sense for me than waiting for annual payments. After taxes, I would receive approximately $24.6 million. The day I returned to the lottery office to officially claim my prize, I wore a suit borrowed from Mike, who still didn't know why I needed it. I signed countless forms, posed for a required photo holding an oversized check, which would not be released unless I approved it, and provided my banking information for the electronic transfer. "Congratulations again, Mr. Reed," Patricia said as we concluded the process. "The funds should be in your account within 48 hours. The press release will go out tomorrow morning." I nodded, feeling strangely calm. "Thank you for your help." When I stepped out of the lottery headquarters, I was still essentially homeless, still unemployed, still estranged from my family. but within 2 days, I would have the means to completely reinvent my life. I checked into a moderate hotel downtown, not extravagant, but considerably nicer than the motel where I'd discovered my win. I didn't want to attract attention by suddenly flashing wealth before the money was securely in my account. I also didn't want to impose on Mike any longer than necessary. Though he'd been a generous host for the past week, never questioning my vague explanations about a family disagreement. That night, I saw the first news report about the lottery winner. Massachusetts musician claims $57 million Powerball jackpot, read the headline on the local news website. The article was brief, mentioning only my name, town, and that I had chosen the lump sum option. A quote from me, provided through the Lottery Commission, said only that I was grateful for this life-changing opportunity. As predicted, my phone began buzzing with texts and calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Old classmates, distant acquaintances, people I barely remembered, all suddenly interested in reconnecting. I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling of my hotel room, thinking about what came next. The money hit my account at 10:17 a.m. on Wednesday morning. I remember staring at the banking app on my phone, at the number with all those zeros, feeling a strange disconnect. It didn't seem real. How could it be real? I'd gone from having $243 to my name to having over $24 million in the span of 5 days. Real or not, I now had choices to make. And the first was whether to tell my parents. The first major purchase I made wasn't a car or a mansion. It was a 6-month lease on a furnished apartment in Cambridge, nice but not flashy, with good security and private parking. I needed a home base while I figured out my next steps, somewhere I could receive mail and deliveries securely. Next came the essentials I'd had to leave behind, clothes that actually fit, a new laptop, basic furnishings to make the apartment feel like mine. I was careful not to go overboard. The horror stories of lottery winners blowing their entire windfall on mansions and luxury cars served as constant cautionary tales in my mind. My one significant splurge during those first weeks was music equipment, professional-grade studio gear that made what I'd left at my parents' house look like toys. A state-of-the-art digital audio workstation, top-of-the-line monitors, microphones that captured sound with breathtaking clarity. I converted the apartment's second bedroom into a home studio and spent hours there each day, reconnecting with the passion that had caused such conflict with my family. Following my advisor's recommendations, I allocated my windfall into different categories. 50% went into a diversified investment portfolio designed for long-term growth. 20% was set aside for taxes and emergency funds. 10% went into a charitable foundation I established to support music education in underfunded schools. The remaining 20% was designated for personal use, housing, living expenses, and pursuing my music production career on my own terms. It was strange how quickly the human mind adapts to new circumstances. Within a month, checking my investment accounts or signing documents for my foundation began to feel almost routine. The strangeness lay in the contrast between my external circumstances and my internal state. On paper, I was now wealthy beyond anything I'd imagined. In my heart, I was still processing the rejection from my family and figuring out who I wanted to be in this new reality. I began reconnecting with musicians I'd worked with before, offering my services as a producer and my new home studio as a recording space, at no charge. Word spread quickly, and soon I was working with talented artists who previously couldn't afford professional production. These collaborations led to the idea of starting my own independent record label. Something I dreamed about but never thought financially possible. Reed Sound Records was born 3 months after my lottery win, with a mission to support independent musicians who needed resources more than they needed corporate direction. I provided funding, production expertise, and business guidance while allowing artists to maintain ownership of their work, the opposite of most industry contracts. Despite all these positive developments, I struggled with the emotional aftermath of my family situation. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Laura Wilson, to help process the complex feelings of abandonment, vindication, guilt, and uncertainty that swirled within me. "Have you told your parents about the lottery win?" she asked during one session. I shook my head. "They haven't reached out since they kicked me out. And honestly, I'm afraid of how I'll feel if they only contact me because of the money." "That's a valid concern," she acknowledged. "But keeping this secret also means maintaining a barrier to any potential reconciliation." "Maybe I'm not ready for reconciliation," I admitted. "Maybe I'm still too angry." Dr. Wilson nodded. "Anger is a natural response to rejection. Take the time you need. There's no rush to make these decisions." Outside of therapy and work, I was cautious about forming new relationships. How could I know if someone liked me for myself or for my newfound wealth? I kept my circle small, mainly limited to the musicians I worked with and my professional advisors. Then I met Haley Morgan. She came to the studio with her brother's band as a backup vocalist. While the band took a break, I found her studying my vinyl collection. "Original pressing of Kind of Blue," she noted, carefully sliding the Miles Davis album back into place. "Nice. You know your jazz," I said, impressed. "Music teacher," she explained with a smile. "Elementary school by day, piano and voice lessons by night." We talked about music education, her favorite recordings, the challenges of getting kids interested in instruments beyond video games. She was passionate, knowledgeable, and completely uninterested in my studio equipment or business, refreshingly focused on music itself. I asked her to coffee after the session, careful to suggest a modest neighborhood cafe rather than anywhere fancy. She accepted, and for 2 hours, we talked without a single mention of money or career success. It was the most normal I'd felt since buying that fateful lottery ticket. Dating as a secret millionaire proved complicated. I didn't want to lie to Haley, but I also didn't want my wealth to become the focal point of our budding relationship. I told her I ran a small independent label and did production work, which was true, but omitted the detail about how I'd acquired the capital to start the business. As weeks turned into months, our relationship deepened. Haley was fiercely independent, passionate about music education, and refreshingly direct. When she finally saw my apartment after several dates, she whistled at the studio setup. "That's some serious equipment for a small independent label," she observed. "I got lucky with some investments," I said, the half-truths sitting uncomfortably in my stomach. She gave me a long look but didn't press the issue. "Well, your artists are lucky to have access to this quality of equipment." As our 6-month anniversary approached, I knew I needed to tell her the full truth. The weight of the secret had begun to feel like a wedge between us. But before I could have that conversation, another revelation forced my hand. 6 months after claiming my lottery winnings, the Boston Herald ran a feature story on local entrepreneurs making waves in the music industry. Somehow, a journalist had connected the dots between Mason Reed, the lottery winner, and Mason Reed, the founder of Reed Sound Records. The article detailed my rags to riches story, complete with quotes from artists I'd worked with and industry professionals who praised the label's artist-friendly contracts. The day the article was published, my phone exploded with notifications. Messages from old colleagues congratulating me, emails from musicians wanting to work with the label, and finally, the call I'd been both expecting and dreading. My parents. I stared at my father's name on the screen for 5 rings before answering. "Hello? Mason." His voice sounded exactly the same, which was jarring given how completely my life had changed. "Your mother and I just saw the article in the Herald. I figured that's why you were calling." I kept my tone neutral, fighting the surge of emotions his voice triggered. "We've been worried about you," he said, an edge of defensiveness in his voice. "You disappeared without a word." "I disappeared?" I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. "You kicked me out with 3 hours' notice and a suitcase." I didn't exactly have a forwarding address to leave. There was a pause. Then my mother's voice came on the line. They must have been on speakerphone. Mason, sweetie, we were just trying to motivate you. We never expected you to actually leave. The casual rewriting of history made my blood boil. Well, I did leave. And now you're calling because you found out I'm successful. That's not fair. Dad interjected. We're calling because you're our son. Your son who became worth calling once he had money. I shot back. Another pause. We should talk in person, Mom suggested. Maybe over dinner? Our treat. Of course. Despite my anger, a part of me wanted to see them. Maybe it was the need for closure, or perhaps some childish desire to show them I'd succeeded despite their lack of faith in me. Fine. But not at the house. Let's meet at Rossetti's downtown, Thursday at 7. I chose an upscale restaurant deliberately, nice enough to be neutral territory, but expensive enough to make a point. When Thursday evening arrived, I dressed carefully in a tailored suit that projected success without flashiness. I arrived 15 minutes early and requested a quiet table in the corner. My parents arrived precisely on time, looking exactly as they had 6 months earlier, yet somehow different, smaller, perhaps, or less intimidating. Dad wore the same navy blazer he'd worn to every nice dinner for the past decade. Mom had on her pearl earrings and a floral dress I recognized from previous special occasions. The first minutes were awkward, stilted small talk about the restaurant, the weather, mutual acquaintances. Mom carried most of the conversation, while Dad studied me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. I let them fill the silence, curious to see how they would navigate this reunion they had initiated. After we ordered, Dad finally addressed the elephant in the room. So, a lottery win. That's quite the stroke of luck. The way he emphasized luck made it clear what he thought about my success. Yes, I agreed. Ironic timing, too. The ticket hit the same day you decided I wasn't worth the space in your house anymore. Mom flinched. Mason, that's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. I interrupted, keeping my voice low but firm. Dad gave me an ultimatum: abandon my career goals or get out. I chose my goals, and you both watched me leave with one suitcase. We thought you'd stay with friends for a few days and come to your senses, Dad said defensively. Come to my senses? You mean give up everything I cared about to conform to your narrow definition of success? The anger I'd been suppressing bubbled to the surface. Do you have any idea what those first days were like? Sleeping in a cheap motel because I had nowhere else to go. Wondering how I'd make my next guitar store paycheck stretch until I found a place to live? Mom's eyes filled with tears. We didn't know. We thought you'd call. Why would I call people who had just rejected me? Who had made it clear that I was only valuable if I lived according to their blueprint? Dad shifted uncomfortably. We were trying to help you. You were wasting your potential in those dead-end jobs. Those dead-end jobs were supporting me while I built something I cared about, I said. And now that something is a successful business. Not because of the lottery money, that just accelerated the timeline. But because I had vision and persistence that you never recognized or valued. A heavy silence fell over the table as our food arrived. We ate quietly for a few minutes, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Mom spoke. We're sorry, Mason. We handled everything wrong. When we saw that article, realized what you've accomplished, we were so proud, but also ashamed of how things ended between us. Proud now that I'm successful by conventional standards, I noted. But you weren't proud when I was working 3 jobs and pursuing my passion. Dad put down his fork. That's fair criticism, he admitted, surprising me. I've had a lot of time to think since you left. I was trying to protect you from struggle by pushing you toward security. But I see now that I was really just trying to make you into a version of myself or your brother. That wasn't fair to you. His admission, however limited, was more than I'd expected. I felt some of my anger dissipate, replaced by a complicated mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. Where do we go from here? Mom asked tentatively. I considered the question seriously. I don't know. I'm not the same person who left your house 6 months ago. I've built a life without you in it. Bringing you back into that life would require real change. Not just apologies motivated by my new financial status. What kind of change? Dad asked. Respect, I said immediately. Respect for my choices and my path. Even when they're different from what you would choose. Real interest in my work, not just because it's now financially successful. And boundaries. I won't tolerate the kind of judgment and criticism that was a constant in our relationship before. They exchanged glances, and I could see them processing my terms. Part of me expected defensiveness or dismissal, their typical responses to being challenged. Instead, Dad nodded slowly. Those seem like reasonable expectations for any relationship. He acknowledged. We can try to do better. Trying isn't enough, I said firmly. I need commitment to actual change. And understand this clearly, my financial resources are not up for discussion or access. This isn't about money. It's about rebuilding trust that was broken long before I left. Of course, Mom said quickly. Too quickly, perhaps, but I decided to take her at her word for now. Let's start small, I suggested as we finished our meal. Dinner once a month. We'll see how it goes. As I paid the bill, ignoring Dad's half-hearted attempt to reach for it, I felt a strange sense of resolution. Not closure, exactly, but a shifting of power. For the first time in our relationship, I was setting the terms. Whether they could meet them remained to be seen, but I was no longer the desperate son seeking approval. I was a man who knew his own worth, lottery winnings aside. Walking them to their car, Mom hugged me tightly. We've missed you, she whispered. Dad extended his hand. Then seemed to think better of it, and pulled me into an awkward embrace. Your studio, the one in the article, it sounds impressive. Maybe someday you could show me what you do there. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was something. Maybe, I agreed. Someday. As I watched them drive away, I felt my phone vibrate with a text from Haley. How did it go with your parents? I'd finally told her the truth about my windfall the day after the article was published. To my relief. Her main reaction had been irritation that I hadn't trusted her sooner, not excitement about my wealth. Better than expected, I texted back. Still complicated. Coming over now? Doors open, she replied. Brought pizza and wine to celebrate your first family dinner in 6 months. Heading to my car. I realized that the true wealth in my life had little to do with the millions in my bank account. It was found in having the freedom to pursue my passion. In building relationships based on authenticity rather than expectation, and in finally understanding my own value, a lesson that, ironically, I might never have learned without that painful rejection and miraculous stroke of luck. 6 months after that first awkward dinner with my parents, my life had found a new rhythm. Reed Sound Records had grown from a personal project into a respected boutique label with 5 full-time employees and a roster of 15 artists. We moved from my home studio to a converted warehouse space in Somerville that housed 3 professional recording studios, offices, and a small performance venue for album release parties and private showcases. The success felt particularly sweet because it was built on my vision, not just my lottery winnings. The money had provided the capital, but the business model, artist-friendly contracts, emphasis on creative control, investment in long-term career development rather than quick hits, that was all me. We were profitable in our second quarter, surprising even my business advisors with how quickly the label had found its niche in the industry. My personal life had stabilized as well. Haley and I were now living together in a brownstone I'd purchased in Cambridge, beautiful but not ostentatious, with a professional home studio where I still worked on personal projects. Haley continued teaching music at her elementary school, insisting on financial independence despite our shared living situation. "Your money is yours," she'd said firmly when we discussed moving in together. "I'm with you for you, not your bank account." My relationship with my parents had evolved into something I never expected. A cautious but genuine reconnection. Our monthly dinners had become weekly Sunday brunches, alternating between restaurants and their home. The first time I returned to the house I'd been kicked out of, the emotional impact nearly overwhelmed me. My old room had been preserved exactly as I'd left it, including the music equipment I'd been forced to abandon. "We couldn't bring ourselves to move anything," Mom admitted when she saw me staring at my old keyboard. "It felt too final." Dad had made the most surprising transformation. After seeing the studio space and watching me work with artists, he developed a genuine interest in my profession. He asked thoughtful questions about production techniques and business strategies, sometimes offering insights from his own business experience that were actually helpful. "I never understood what you were building before," he confessed during one of our conversations. "I saw only what you weren't doing, not what you were creating." The scholarship program I'd established in partnership with Haley's school had become my favorite philanthropic project. The Mason Reed Music Initiative provided instruments, production equipment, and professional instruction to talented kids from low-income backgrounds. Watching these young musicians discover their voices and develop their skills reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with music in the first place. Scott, my perfect older brother, had initially been awkward about my sudden wealth. Our family dynamics completely upended in an instant. But over time, we'd found a new equilibrium. His business acumen had actually proven valuable as the label expanded, and he occasionally consulted on major contracts or investment opportunities. Slowly, we were rebuilding a relationship based on mutual respect rather than comparison. My lottery win had now been public knowledge for nearly a year, and the initial frenzy of attention had mostly subsided. Occasionally, I'd receive messages from old acquaintances suddenly remembering our great friendship. But those grew less frequent as time passed. The people who remained in my life were those who valued me for reasons beyond my bank account. Dr. Wilson, my therapist, had helped me work through the complex emotions surrounding my windfall and family reconciliation. Sudden wealth often amplifies existing personality traits and relationship dynamics rather than fundamentally changing them, she'd observed. The healthiest lottery winners are those who use the money to become more authentically themselves, not to become someone entirely new. That insight had guided my decisions over the past year. I hadn't tried to reinvent myself as someone I wasn't. Instead, I'd used my resources to fully become the person I'd always been struggling to be, a creative professional who supported other artists. A man who valued authenticity over appearances, someone who measured success by passion and purpose rather than paychecks. On the anniversary of my lottery win, I invited my parents, Scott and his wife, Haley, and a few close friends to a private dinner at the brownstone. As we gathered around the table laden with food catered by my favorite local restaurant, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for how far we'd all come. "I'd like to propose a toast," Dad said, rising from his seat with glass in hand. The room quieted as everyone turned to him. "To Mason, not for his luck in winning the lottery, but for his wisdom in winning at life. You've built something meaningful from your passion, created opportunities for others, and taught your old man that success comes in many forms. I'm proud of you, son, not for what you have, but for who you are." His words, unimaginable a year earlier, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. As glasses clinked around the table, I caught Haley's gaze. She squeezed my hand under the table, her smile reflecting my own emotional response to this moment of validation. Later that evening, after our guests had departed, Haley and I sat on the rooftop deck overlooking the Cambridge skyline. The spring air carried the promise of renewal, much like the fresh start I'd been given. "Would you change anything?" she asked. curled against me as we watched the lights of the city twinkle in the darkness. If you could go back to that day when they kicked you out? I considered the question carefully. I wouldn't change the outcome, I said finally. But maybe the timing. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd checked that ticket before leaving the house. Would I have flaunted it in their faces? Would they have suddenly decided I was worth keeping around? Would I have missed the lessons I needed to learn about self-worth and independence? And what were those lessons exactly? Haley asked, always the teacher looking for the moral of the story. That my value was never about my bank account, either when it was empty or when it was full, I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. That true wealth comes from creating something meaningful, from authentic relationships, from knowing who you are and standing firm in that knowledge even when others doubt you. Haley nodded against my shoulder. That's worth more than any lottery jackpot. The irony is that I might never have learned that without both the rejection and the windfall happening in such close succession, I admitted. Being kicked out forced me to define myself outside of their expectations. The money just gave me the freedom to do it more quickly and comfortably. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, contemplating the strange twists of fate that had brought us to this moment. The universe had a peculiar sense of timing, delivering my lowest point and highest stroke of luck within hours of each other, creating a contrast that illuminated truths I might otherwise have missed. So what's next? Haley asked eventually. You've built the label, reconnected with your family, established the scholarship program. What's the next chapter of the Mason Reed story? I smiled, pulling her closer. I'm thinking about expanding the label to include a music education division. Professional development for teachers, curriculum resources, technology for underserved schools. Combining your expertise with my resources. I like the sound of that partnership, she said, turning to kiss me softly. As we made our way inside, I took one last look at the city lights below. 1 year ago, I'd stood on my parents' porch with a single suitcase, feeling utterly lost and alone. Now I understood that sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you needed to discover what you truly want. The day my parents kicked me out with a suitcase was the day the lottery hit. By dawn, I was rich, not just in money, but in possibility. The true value of that windfall wasn't the millions in my account, but the freedom it gave me to build a life authentic to myself, to transform rejection into resilience, and to redefine success on my own terms. What about you? Have you ever experienced a moment where what seemed like your worst day unexpectedly led to something better? Or had to choose between security and passion? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes our biggest setbacks lead to our greatest comebacks. Thank you for being part of my story today. And remember, true wealth isn't measured by your bank account, but by the authentic life you build with whatever resources you have.